Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 6, Episode 25, The Sound of Her Voice. Before we continue, you can find us on Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast.
That is correct, and as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because we are great. We're awesome, and I think we're a really good time. So if you love Star Trek Deep Space Nine, you will, of course, find a lot of things that you will enjoy about our show, and hopefully some things that you will want to comment on yourself. So, as David said, tonight we are talking about the episode "The Sound of Her Voice," the second to last episode of season 6, and it's probably one of the more underappreciated, but also, in my opinion, beautifully done episodes of this show, especially of this season. I mean, there's a lot of high notes of season 6, but this is definitely one. And coming in at the kind of the tail end of the season is also pretty interesting. Uh, Way to place this one and give us a lot of ways to catch up with some people that we really hadn't considered before until now. I didn't realize we didn't have a lot of information about um, up until now. So I really like that. So of course we're going to get into all that, but before we do, I like to give ourselves a chance to check in with one another because it's probably been about a week since we've last talked. So David, how has your week been?
Week's been good. Finished up that book, Indianapolis, which I had mentioned last week. Um, the second half of the book, which I read this week, was about how the captain of the ship, the USS Indianapolis, which was sunk in the last days of World War II, uh, basically the Navy, in light of the fact that they had just won the war, didn't want to publicize a pretty massive failure of a ship sinking and nearly 1,000 men dying, and that tragedy happened because a number of people basically failed to do their jobs. They got distracted or lazy, basically, near the end of the war. And so instead of taking the time to carefully figure out who was responsible for all the mishaps that led up to the sinking, they blamed it all on the captain of the ship for specious reasons. Um, Basically, to kind of make it go away, they held the trial too quickly. They gave a poor, reason for why they court-martialed him, and it took until the late '90s before there was any sort of recognition of the Navy. In the late '90s, the Navy was brought before Congress to answer questions about why the court martial happened, and the Navy wanted to keep the status quo of, well, he was held accountable for his ship sinking. But by that point, people were already asking questions. There was already a number of civilian led movements to get the conviction kind of, if not overturned, because you can't overturn a court martial, at least recognize that, or someone officially state that, yeah, actually, it looks like this was done improperly. It was an improperly done court martial, because the captain did, nearly 20 years later, he did shoot himself. It's not entirely clear if it was because of the sinking that and the court martial that was the reason, but he's a 70-year-old man, at the end of his life, and the court martial, of course, was hung around his neck for the rest of his life, and he received, hate mail and other angry letters to the rest of his life from, family members of those who died, because the Navy officially said it was his fault. And so it's just a kind of a bittersweet story about uh, the men who died in that tragic instance, and his story, and how 50 years later things were kind of not. I mean, again, you can't overturn a court martial in that sense. It wasn't a, like, one of the points the book makes is that a court martial during World War II was not the sort of trial we think of, or the court martialing we think of today. Today, it's a much more serious affair than it was back then. It was still a serious affair then, but it wasn't necessarily a criminal act per se to be convicted of. So he wasn't convicted of criminal negligence of as much as just, like, he got demoted basically instead of promoted where he should have been promoted. But anyway, long story short, very good book. The other thing I've been doing, Squid Game season 2 came out recently. I've been watching that. I didn't rewatch season 1. I did rewatch one episode from season 1, which I really liked. It's the bridge episode for those who know. And then season 2, I've been watching that. I not finished it. It's only 7 episodes this season as opposed to 10. I'm only 5 episodes in, but I do like the continuation of the story from the first season. I think it makes sense what they're doing with it. But I'm curious what they're gonna do because if it's only 7 episodes, not 10, that means the stories are gonna be a little bit shorter this time around. So I'm curious about why. But it's a good show. I know it's really popular. I think during like the pandemic or something, it was really popular for
Yeah.
like overly popular even. I know Barry, you were like, I ain't watching that. Everyone,
No, no, it was, and that's my weird failing. If you tell me you gotta watch it, you gotta watch it, you gotta watch it, it's like guaranteed I'm not gonna watch it. I
right?
still haven't seen Breaking Bad for that particular reason. So, yeah, just and anybody watching this who hears that, I don't just put your eyeballs back in your head. Yes, I have still not seen Breaking Bad or The Wire or The League or any of those shows because again, people are just yeah, you gotta watch it. Heck, I didn't watch The Walking Dead until they were already on season 6
Right,
because of that same thing. So yeah, and I mean, there you go. So yeah,
right,
it's just don't do that to me. Just say,
yeah,
oh, it's a pretty good show. You should watch it sometime.
yeah,
Okay, that's
yeah.
enough for me, and I'll
You
check it
should,
out shortly.
yeah.
But if you come at me like a rabid dog about a show, it bottom of the list. I will find something from the '60s to watch before I watch whatever thing it is that you're talking about.
Hyped about it.
Just say.
Yeah. Other than that, so the tonight, well, we're gonna in a couple weeks we're gonna do that thing, that game I play where it's an all day game. You know that board game that takes all day to play on a Saturday. We did our initial round of picking things today before I got on with you, which was fun. It's it's such a long game. It takes so much attention to play. It's just nuts. But that's basically all I've been up to. Anything with you?
No, not really. Work, and then I've been making my way through um, that show Blue Bloods, which, as we've talked about a couple of times, 14 seasons. Still don't like the Tom Selleck character,
Oh yeah,
Frank Reagan. He bothers me. There's a quality about him that I don't like, and I think it's the whole him kind of toeing the line between being like old school cop and this boys club type deal, goody goody versus him kind of strong arming people into doing whatever it is he wants. Like he finds a way to get his way,
mm,
and then you're supposed to just accept that whatever he wants is ultimately the right way to do it because he is this moral paragon
right.
in the show that is unassailable. And I really don't like that. I like it, and again, I feel like it's something we talked about before. I like characters who, you can feel like you are right, that you have the absolute moral high ground, and maybe 7 times out of 10 that is correct, but you shouldn't maintain it forever. I don't feel like there's enough growth there for you. There should be moments where when you feel like you are absolutely correct, but then something proves that you are unequivocally wrong, and you need to sit in that and learn from it. That's how, to me, that's how growth happens. You have to accept that that happened and then move through it with intelligence and grace. And he never does that. It's almost like they seem to come close, but it's like they don't want to tarnish their boy. So there's some always some point where even when he's saying I didn't know that, or I'm sorry, or whatever, it ultimately bears out that whatever he said originally was correct. So at this point, it's, well, we really should just listen to Frank the whole time, and then
Yeah.
we'd be okay. I don't
I'm
like that.
sorry I was so right. You had to learn the hard way.
Right. Basically, that's what it is. I'm sorry, I'm so good, and you can't. And then it's in every, and also the other part of that that I don't like is everyone is always so shocked at how good he is, and they always find ways to work in statements like, "You really are this Boy Scout. You really are uh this way or whatever. You really believe that? You oh my God, that's just I just all we need is that classic 40s music and someone going, gee willikers, he really is the genuine article, and I like that, all of that, and I don't like that. I don't like that at all because I just don't feel like it's realistic. I mean, you can be rooted in your principles and your morals, and that's fine. But
Right.
there should also be some room for growth and for acceptance of a different perspective. It's not saying that you have to adopt that perspective 100% into whatever, but there needs to be something that says you acknowledge that people look at things differently than you, that live differently than you, and that's also okay to some degree. And he never does. He just there's no equivocating for him. So I think that's my main problem with that character. The other characters on the show, though, they have great shades of gray that they muddle through, and they also have their own moral high grounds that they maintain. And there are times when that's challenged, and yes, they're proven right. There are times when they're proven wrong, and they acknowledge I should have done this better. I should have attempted this a different way. That's my fault. I'm sorry. So that to me is showing growth. They are acknowledging that they were wrong. They have now incorporated this into themselves to be better. And the show is written well enough that if you follow the show for all 14 seasons, you actually see the characters do that.
Right.
One of my favorite characters is the character of Danny Reagan. And when you start the show, he is the typical hothead detective who thinks that he can do no wrong, and he strong arms criminals, and he's known to brutalize them a bit and whatever. But he gets called out on it a couple of times, for not only from other cops but from family members, and like he's got this antagonistic thing going on with one of the brothers for a good bit there. But he, as you watch, he gradually he learns, and he stops doing that, and he finds other ways to make his case, and it makes him a way more effective detective, and it makes him a better person. And so that's what I really liked was, they pivoted away from this very one-dimensional aspect of him and really kind of fleshed him out over the 14 years and made him he's just a better, well-rounded individual. So it's like, yeah, I really like that a lot about him, and I feel like the show should have gone more with him and his development than they did. And I guess it's because there's like 10 characters on the show, so it's hard to give enough time for every single one of them. But
Right.
you know, but I think overall it's a good show, and this is the last season. I've got, I think, four or five episodes left in the
Oh wow.
season. So
Okay.
yeah, and
That
I and
reminds me. Oh, sorry, you weren't done yet. Sorry.
Well, I was just gonna say, I do my deep dive as always, and I try to figure out why the show is ending after 14 seasons, and apparently it's a executive decision. All the writers still want to do the show, all the actors still want to do the show. The actors even agreed to take pretty significant pay cuts from what they say in order to keep doing the show for several more seasons. But the powers that be have decided 14 is it. So
It's a lot, to be honest.
it
So
is a lot. And it got me to thinking, I was looking around, and there are a lot of shows that have lasted, that 14, 15 season and beyond, like Law and Order, SVU, I think is on 20, 21 seasons. The original NCIS just made it to season 22. There's like we've talked about ER a lot on this show. ER made it to, I think, 13 seasons. Um, you know, uh, Grey's Anatomy is on its 20th season as well, and it amazes me the number of shows that do make it to that level of longevity. And I said tonight, as a matter of fact, I said there should be some kind of study into what it is about these shows that makes them last that long.
right.
Is it character? Is because and the weird thing is they're all really different. You know, Blue Bloods, the same cast has been on that show the whole time. They've introduced a couple of new characters, but the core cast has remained the same. NCIS kind of had the same cast for a very long time, but then around like season 8, they started bringing in a bunch of people, and now it's like completely changed over. I think there's only one original cast member left who's been on the show since you know season 1. Um, Law and Order, I think they only have one character on that show now who is still there, the Olivia Benson character. She is from inception and she's been there ever since. They've had other characters who have come and gone and some that have come back. They've had characters who the actor playing the character was on the show so long they died and
Wow.
their character was out. Um yeah, and then there's other shows that they last 2 seasons. They're flash in the pans, and that's it. And it just makes me wonder what it is about these shows that gets them to stay 14, 15, 20, 22 seasons while these other shows can't seem to, get out of the proverbial, starting block.
Wow.
So, but that's what I spent a lot of my time doing, making my way through that show. I've also been rewatching other shows. Just I don't know, like I get in these weird moods and I suddenly want to just kind of go back over things again. I was watching Savage Rain, which is an animated show on Max, and I've talked about that show before too. They only have the one season. I'm eagerly anticipating season 2 coming out hopefully soon. But that's the animated show where the scientists have landed on this alien planet and they're basically trying to survive until they can be rescued, and everything on the planet seems to be set up to kill them,
Right.
and in the most gruesome and oddly fascinating ways. If you have the time, you should definitely check out a couple of episodes. It will
What's that one called
definitely
again?
freak you out. Savage Rain.
And what's is
So
it? Paramount.
no, it's on Max, HBO Max.
Got it. Okay. Got it. Got it.
Like one of my favorite death scenes, and this is going to sound kind of morbid, but one of my favorite death scenes, this guy in the episode, he's got this voice recorder and he's been using it. And he's kind of been annoying other people in his group while he's using it. And so at one point, one of the guys in the group gets frustrated, takes the recorder from him and chucks it deep into the woods, right? So then they have their little argument about it and why it's significant to the guy and everything, which makes him feel bad for having chucked it in the woods. So he goes into the woods looking for it. And as he's pushing through all the underbrush and everything else, he finds it laying on what appears to be a fern plant, right? So he goes over and picks it up. And as soon as he does, the fern plant kind of like shoots up out of the ground and envelops him. And it starts to slowly wrap itself around his limbs and his neck and his arms and everything else. And then it starts to twist him in all different directions. And so you watch and listen as his bones and everything else snap and crackle. And he just kind of twists and inverts in on himself like the worst kind of pretzel. And it's just like, there it is. And then he's like he looks kind of like a plant statue holding on to this recorder in his hand, and that's it. And that's his death. And no one knows that he died because he took off on his own to go and find the recorder. And no one knows where he threw the recorder because again he threw it and no one was watching. So he basically dies this very horrible, very painful death
Oh well.
alone in the middle of nowhere, and no one knows. There's that. So
Oh man.
yeah, it was awful. It was like horrible, but beautiful at the same time. I'm weird. I'll accept that, but that's basically what I was doing.
And
So
it involves what rain again? Heavy rain or
savage rain.
savage rain?
Yeah, and they've got all kinds of stuff. Like there's a robot that slowly gains sentience because it's being there's a fungus that's growing inside of it that starts acting like neurons and stuff in there, making all these connections which allow it to achieve a level of sentience. And there's some other creatures that are like mobile pitcher plants that latch on to people and make weird pod copies of them and make them do all kinds of weird stuff. And it's it's trippy, like just to watch it. And like some of the episodes, I think that's another part of it that I like. While it does explain certain things that are going on, a lot of the episodes are quiet because everybody is spread out across the planet and they're trying to get to a point where they can survive until rescue. So you're watching these people either as just, completely solitary, one on one, doing this, person versus elements type thing, or you have like a couple of them that are working together and um, trying to figure out their path and all that kind of stuff. Did you find it? I think were you trying to look it up on
Yeah, I can't find it. Savage Rain. Is it Rain, Rain, or is it
maybe it was.
R?
I will try to um, find it on Max,
I mean, don't get me
whatever
wrong.
it's
We
called.
we can
But
look it up.
we got other things. Yeah, well, I'll look
Yeah.
it up later before the end of this show. I will find it. But
Okay,
because we're not
gotcha.
here to talk about any of that, we are here to talk about Star Trek: Deep Space Nine in this wonderful episode. We're 20 minutes into our show and haven't even really mentioned it yet. So let's get right to it. Do you
Yeah.
want me to give the recap, or do you want to do it?
I can give it a guess. Whose turn is it?
I actually think it's my turn.
Go for it.
Yeah, I think it's my turn. For the sake of time, I would hit the highlights and then we'll dive into everything. This episode is, like I said, second to last episode of the season. We see our crew on their way back home after a long mission where everybody's nerves seem to be frayed, everybody seems rather depressed, and just not getting along. There's even a moment where Cisco says something rather mean about Bashir, which Cassidy is there, calls him out on, but Cisco doesn't really correct it or anything like that. So, like we said, everybody is there except for Odo, Kira, Quark, and the smattering of our secondary cast. Nog, Rom, Jake, so forth and so on.
Well, Dax too.
Um, and Dax, yes, Dax is there, of course.
Not there. She's not there.
She's on the Defiant.
No, she's not. I don't think
Okay,
so.
so I could have swore that she was. I could have swore that she was on the Defiant, but
I don't think
maybe
so.
not.
All right.
Well, the
Keep
main
going.
people
Keep
that we
going.
need to know about that are on the Defiant are Cisco, O'Brien, and Bashir. Okay, yes, Worf is there,
Yes.
but those three are particularly important. Anyway, they're on their way back. They get a distress call from a planet that's way off the beaten path. It's this woman, Captain Lisa Cusack. They're trying to make contact with her because they receive her automated distress signal, but they can't seem to make contact with her. But they decide they're going to divert their course and try to rescue her. It's going to take them 6 days to get to her. And meanwhile, they task O'Brien with trying to find a way to make contact with her. O'Brien sets the task. Shortly thereafter, he does manage to make contact with her, and they determine that she was on the USS Olympia, which crashed 8 years ago. And she
No,
has
it was on
been,
an 8 year
or
mission.
it was on an eight. Yeah, that's right. It was on an 8 year mission, and they were on their way. And so we find out from Lisa once they make contact with her. Again, they were on the 8 year mission. They were on their way home when they found this alien planet. As the captain, she had told them to scan said weird planet, which set off a cascade of terrible events, which caused the Olympia to crash. And she has been marooned on the planet ever since. It's an L class planet, which means that the atmosphere is not that great. You can survive in it temporarily, but the longer you're there, the more carbon dioxide is going to build up in your body. So they make her take these injections of, I think they called it trioxin. It's basically to boost up her lungs' ability, strength to pull oxygen into her lungs from the surrounding atmosphere, but it's a stopgap at best. So they're like, she's got enough. She should last by the time we get there. It's not going to be comfortable, but at least she'll be okay until we can get there and bring her back to the ship. In the meantime, they decide that since she's been alone for so long, she wants someone to talk to. So Cisco tasks the crew with basically being available to her 24/7. Because I think that's also another side effect of the drug that they've got her on. It's going to keep her awake.
Yeah.
So this is going to, offset her loneliness. So that starts with Cisco, who then starts to relay captain to captain the status of the Federation and the war and what's going on. And he's kind of giving her this really depressing blow by blow report, to which she basically stops him and it's just like, tired of hearing about that. Like, give me something else. And he kind of starts to tell her a little bit about what's going on between him and Cassidy, and she's starting to kind of help him see what his issue is because he's aware there's a problem, but he hasn't put his finger on what that problem is yet. Um, as they continue to talk, at one point she in, helps him to see that part of it is he's got this dichotomy in his life, his professional life, his personal life. When he's on the station, when they're at home, having Cassidy around is wonderful and he enjoys it. But when he's on the Defiant, when he's in command, when he's ship captain, having her around is a distraction, an unknown element that he doesn't know how to adjust for. And so that's why he's been so distant with her lately, because she's kind of coming into an area of his life where he wasn't really ready for her to be. Um, we then have her talking with Dr. Bashir, who is Mr. Workaholic, it seems. He's doing all the work, he's not paying her any kind of attention. At one point, she pretends that she's being attacked by some alien creature on the planet in order to get his attention back on her, to which he's basically like, yeah, I'm punishing you because I've been talking and you haven't been listening. So nice, funny little moment there, and a way to remind him of what he's supposed to be doing. And, and I see David
It's a
really
messed
liked
up
that moment.
moment. It's
It
a
was.
messed up moment, but it's
Yeah, it
hilarious.
really is. And so then he refocuses on her. They share a nice conversation as well, in which he's kind of talking about his overall demeanor. He's genetically engineered. He knows that he's factually smarter than everyone else, but that doesn't make him this kind of remote robot type individual that everybody seems to think. Now, finally, she gets to around to talking to O'Brien, which I feel like she has the more personal conversations with O'Brien. This is just my opinion. O'Brien is really struggling with the fact that he is yet again a man in war. As we know, he has an extensive background fighting in various conflicts for the Federation, and of course, he had the Zenkethi War from several years ago, and the Cardassian War.
Hmm.
So he's kind of burnt out on war, and yet again, here he is, finds himself with the possibility facing of losing friends, family, and so forth. And he's just, he's not handling it very well. And as they talk, she's trying to point him in the direction of, sharing this with his friends, with his family. And they share a nice moment where they're talking about ship's counselors. And I would have loved if they had mentioned Deanna Troy here in this moment, but
Yeah.
they definitely steered around that, and but still talked about ship's counselors in general and how important they are. But basically, also relying on your friends during tough times, speaking with them about those things that are important to you and bothering you, and how to make it through. Now, during all this, Bashir is also monitoring Captain Cusack, and they realize that her situation is progressing farther along than they thought. Also, it seems that the amount of trioxin that she had is not what they thought. That he thinks that perhaps at some point the samples that she's got became contaminated. So she's going to run out in 2 days, but they're 3 days away at best. So that means that, yeah, if they don't get there soon, she's gonna die. So they figure out a way to coax some more energy into the system to make the ship fly faster. This, of course, is a concern because while the engines can certainly go fast enough, the ship might shake itself apart if they don't have enough energy to hold it together. They want to take energy from the weapons reserve, which Worf objects to, but they counter with, "We're well off the beaten path here. There's very little chance that we run into the Jem'Hadar." Cisco decides to risk it. They take the energy they need, and they get there. When they arrive at the planet is, as they anticipated, covered in Metreon radiation. There's nothing they can do to um, take the ship through it. So they opt instead to take down one of the shuttlecrafts, seldom seen, rarely used shuttle on the Defiant, down to the surface to find her. They locate the wreckage from the crashed Olympia. They locate the cave. They go into said cave and they find Lisa Cusack, only she's dead. and she's been dead for 3 years.
3.5 years. Yeah.
So now they're like, well, how is that possible? We were just talking to her. How did how is she dead for 3 years? They figure out that it's actually the same unique energy that caused the ship to crash. Also, was probably affecting the transmission, and basically, it was a transmission through time. So they were talking to her from when she initially crashed on the planet all those years ago, and I guess the times didn't really sync up. So it's a real gut punch for everybody who's come to know this woman over the past few days in speaking with her and kind of relaying their innermost thoughts and stuff to her, to now think that they not only did they not arrive in time, but really they had no hope of ever arriving on
Right.
time. She'd been dead for 3 years. Um, Cisco opts to bring her remains back to the station to give her an official proper burial with honor. That's where we see Dax, and she says that they are having what's called an Irish wake, where you drink, you tell stories, you sing songs, and you remember the good times of the person who is no longer with them. Everybody, well, not everybody, but O'Brien and Bashir eulogize Captain Cusack and how important she became to them and the influence she had on their life in their brief interaction. And that's it for that. Now we have another B storyline going along, and that is Odo, and it's Odo, Kira, and Quark really, and also Jake is there. Jake is doing some character study for something else he's potentially going to be writing, and he wants to um, make more realistic villains. So he's decided to shadow Quark of all people, who takes umbrage to being called a villain. He is a businessman. He's not a cheat or whatever. He's a businessman. It's very important. Odo is taking Quark to task on every little infraction that he can find in the bar, which is really starting to get on Quark's nerves,
He
to
is
say the
bending the
least.
rules as
Yeah,
hard as he can to get
yeah.
those. Yeah.
So, you know, but Quark notices that whenever Kira comes around, Odo is instantly all attention's focused on Kira.
Yep.
And he realizes that if that's the case, here's an opportunity for him to maybe make some pretty good profit. So he concocts this scheme to totally distract the constable at the end of the week so that he can smuggle some illicit crystals. They don't really tell us what the crystals are. Like, are they drug crystals? Are they some kind of programming crystal? We don't know. There's just, they're illegal, is all we do know, and
Right.
he conspires to set Odo up so that he's out of the way, so that Quark's ne'er do well Nausicaan friend can come by and pay him 200 bars of gold pressed platinum for these crystals. So Quark then highlights the fact that it's been a month since Kira and Odo got together, their first date, and he basically is like, you gotta get her a gift, man. It's the anniversary. You gotta do this. So Odo buys into it, hook, line, and sinker, and then becomes preoccupied with finding a gift for Kira, which allows Quark to arrange for the Nausicaan to show up. Then it's, well, now you got her a gift, but how are you going to give it to her? What are you going to do? How's your night? What night are you planning? What are you going to, all this kind of stuff. And so this also sets Odo on a bit of a, tailspin, trying to figure out what to do for Kira. He's locked himself away looking at computer programs. Meanwhile, Quark is continuing his schemes, and Jake is there just kind of as support.
Take notes.
Yeah, taking notes. So it all seems
Right.
like it's going to go off without a hitch. Kira and Odo will be secured away in a holosuite on Saturday, and the Nausicaan's going to come and pay for these crystals, and Quark's going to make a killing. He just can't wait. But then Odo throws a wrench in his plan and says, we're not doing it on Saturday. We're going to do it on Sunday because our first date was on Saturday, but it was awful. It ended terribly. So I've decided we're going to celebrate our first kiss, which happened the next day on Sunday. So now Quark is trying to figure out a way to. He tries to contact his Nausicaan friend to reschedule. That doesn't work. So now he's panicking to try to figure out what he can do and realize he's backed into a corner. There's nothing he can do. There's no way he can change it. So he is stuck. And so he and Jake are in the cargo bay. They're looking at these crystals. And he's like, I would have made so much money off this. It was a perfect deal, a perfect setup. Now, instead, you know, at this point, as soon as Odo finds out, we're all going to be arrested and I'm going to be thrown in jail. I just can't win. And then he laments about how it sucks because he actually was instrumental in getting Odo and Kira together. To which Jake's like, what did you do? And so that's when he reminds Jake and us that it was him who prompted Odo to never give up and to push on and pursue Kira. And he really wishes that just once he would get some kind of break for the good deed that he did, but he's just accepting the fact that he's going to get arrested. Well, unbeknownst to Jake and Quark, who other than Odo is listening in because you can't distract our boy Odo. He's too good at his job, and he's not going to let some anniversary stop him from being the best damn detective this side of the wormhole. And so he has overheard everything that Quark has said, and he
Guys himself with
basically,
some barrels.
yes, and he has come to the decision that Quark is right, that Quark did help him out. And if it wasn't for Quark, he probably wouldn't have remained steadfast in his devotion to Kira, which ultimately, as we know, got them together. So at the last minute, as Quark is sitting in his bar and recognizing that he's going to be arrested anytime now, Odo and Kira walk in fully dressed for their evening in the holosuite, and he says, Kira actually said that she agreed with you. I was ready to go with Sunday, but Kira agreed with you. We're going to take Saturday instead. So for the next 4 hours, we're going to be in the holosuite if it's available. And he's like, yeah, it's available. So he gives them the holosuite. They go up to the holosuite, and it's all Quark can do not to like skip out of the bar because he's going to be able to make his rendezvous and make his money. And then, of course, we see at the end where Odo alludes to the fact that he knew, as we knew, he knew all along that this is going to happen.
And he told Kira, and they're
And
both
he
like,
told
"Oh, we're
Kira,
gonna give
we're
him
going
a
to give him
pass."
this one. We're going to do him a solid. We're going to give him this one, but just this one. And that's how that storyline ends. So the happy couple gets to continue to be happy. Quark gets to make his deal and think that he beat Odo. And we all know, of course, like once again, I say Odo is the best security chief we've ever seen. Yeah. So, and that's the end of our B plot on
Yeah.
this particular episode. So,
One little A
wonderfully
plot thing.
done. Wonderfully done A and B plots, I think. But go ahead.
One little A plot thing. Cisco goes to Cassidy while at the wake and says, "Hey, I need to talk to you about my behavior on the ship." And she's like, "Oh, okay, all right. You're making dinner, so they're gonna reconcile. We know that they're gonna be okay." So
Hmm. So, like I said, I think this is a beautifully done episode. It's definitely an underappreciated um, episode, and I just the sound of her voice. I think it's a great title for this episode because the voice acting on this one is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I believe that's Deborah Wilson who is voicing Captain Lisa Cusack here in this episode, and she does a phenomenal job. She's done a lot of different shows. I know she was on Mad TV a long time ago. She's done a lot of character bits here and there, but
right.
this one to me is by far a standout performance by her. Um,
Yeah, apparently she's
just
really
wonderful.
known for doing voice acting, so this is right in her wheelhouse.
Yeah,
Um,
she's got a great voice, fantastic voice. I think they did a great job with casting this here. I couldn't imagine who they could have done who could have done this besides her. It's a wonderfully done bit by her.
yeah, she had a lot to do. She had a lot of heavy lifting as the voice of this downed captain. Um, I am gonna say that I found this episode. I have some nitpicks in this episode. There's nothing major, I guess. It's certainly not about the A plot.
Yeah.
The B plot. Well, let's start with the B plot because it's easier to just get through. I find the ethics of the B plot to be just kind of all over the place. Like Jake is the son of the man who runs the station, and he's going around asking for the chance to take notes on someone who's engaged in criminal activity on his dad's station. And Odo knows about these crystals and lets it happen. I'm gonna let Court get away with it this one time. And I'm like what are these crystals? Because like is it like
That
marijuana? Is it
I was gonna
meth?
say that is that I think that is why they don't explain what the crystals are.
Yeah,
Because at this point we have to accept the fact that in Star Trek, I mean, especially with the station, we're dealing with a large set of laws. So which laws are being violated? Bajoran, Federation, Nausicaan, Tellarite. Who is why are these crystals illegal? We
yep,
don't know what they are. We don't know who's claiming them to be illegal. One man's drug is another man's life-saving medicine.
right.
We just don't know enough
Mhm.
about it. So by keeping us in the dark about the function and so-called illicit nature of the thing in general, it allows us to think that what Quark is doing is not that bad. If they had told us that these were super psychedelic crystals that,
Or
yeah,
biogel. Like if it was
yeah,
biogel, there's no way Quark would have been able to, or the Odo
right.
let Quark get away with it.
Or it
It
was a a weapon of mass destruction's power cell,
right.
and the weapon won't work without these crystals in it,
That's
and
why
that kind of
I
thing.
ask, like, okay, so is this like, is it meth? Is it marijuana? Like I'm trying
Yeah,
to find some sort of correlation in my mind, and I'm
and they
thinking it.
keep you in the dark on purpose. They
Well, yeah.
absolutely keep you in the
But
dark
what's funny about all that is, like, I mean, he says I can get 200 bars of gold pressed latinum. It's like, whoa! I mean, you seem like there are 10, 8, 10 maybe crystals in this box. That's quite a bit for apparently for these crystals. I mean, let me put it this way: is Odo so good that like you couldn't resell stolen silverware from the local restaurant? Like that's how good Odo is, or is are these excuse me, are these crystals like that great? I don't know. It's just this episode, in order to make this plot work, like I don't think Jake was needed. He's only
No,
there in order to get Quark to talk. We need Quark to explain why
the
he's doing what he's
exposition of
doing.
Quark, right?
So Jake brings it out of him. The Odo plot, uh, we know Odo. We know Odo's not going to be fooled. He might be flustered by some of the stuff that Quark's having him run around doing, but we know that he's not going to let Quark get away with it. So we saw that coming, and then the fact that not only does Odo know, but you know Kira knows. I just I don't know. The plot
So
was just like I think it was a little bit of a mess. I'm just gonna put it that way. I think that plot was a little bit of a mess.
And I think that part of it was also too that we see in the beginning Odo is nitpicking Quark about various infractions. So by
Yep.
also not telling us what these crystals are, what they do, whatever, it could almost be seen as an extension of that. That um yes, this could end up with him being arrested because it's a more severe infraction, but we don't have a way of equating the severity. We don't have a way of saying, oh, well, it's the equivalent of him selling crystal meth,
Right.
or heroin or whatever. We just don't know. So all we know is that it's going to be quite profitable for Quark, which, based upon what we know of Quark up to this point, we should feel pretty confident in saying whatever it is that he is selling is probably not that bad. Quark has a conscience to a
Yes.
degree,
That's true.
and we've seen him back out of things and also find ways to get hardcore criminals caught when they are doing something truly illicit. So
Right.
if he's down to do whatever it is, sell whatever it is, chances are it's probably not as bad as we think, even though it's still highly profitable for him with the 200
Yes.
bars.
And it actually that's a good point. Quark is the type as a Ferengi who would maximize profit over whatever it is he's selling. So maybe it
But
was
only up
marijuana, but he
Yeah,
knows
but
he's
only up
selling
to a
bigger stuff.
point, right? It's like
Yeah.
he does it up to a point. If whatever he will go for the maximum profit, but if ultimately whatever it is that he's selling or supposed to sell is bad or dangerous or whatever, he finds a way to not be a part of it.
Well,
So
that actually brings up the other part that to me I think is just kind of funny about this episode. We're 6 seasons in, near the end of season 6, and Quark says that like he's never once gotten one over off on Odo. Like I feel like the two of them have been having this tit for tat back and forth relationship for their whole relationship. I would
Hmm.
think that Quark's gotten one or two over on Odo. Maybe Quark is just complaining and he's exaggerating how bad it is. But if it's true that Odo always gets him, then like I'm just surprised that Quark keeps trying now. Like this is what a
Well,
10-plus year relationship you guys have had. And you're still
yeah.
trying to do the same old tricks. Like, come on.
Well, he's still a Ferengi. He's not gonna stop being a Ferengi.
Well, I
And
mean, but go be a
I think
Ferengi
that's
somewhere else.
well, I think that's part of the appeal for him is like, and as we've seen them say a couple of times, Odo says that he's made Quark a better thief, and or made him a better criminal. And he was like, yeah, because you've tried to get me on stuff before, and you never have. So it's kind of implied that Odo basically he keeps Quark in check. There are
Yeah,
certain things that Quark gets away with,
right.
but he never crosses a certain line because he knows
Yeah,
that Odo will come after him for
for
those things,
real.
whatever
Yeah.
it is. Right.
And it always
So,
has felt too that Odo is using Quark as his contact. Like we use him as our weather vane in the criminal underworld. We use him as our, you know, whatever contact we need, whatever source we need in the criminal underworld. Quark may not always be happy or even aware of his being the lead, if you will,
mhm.
but um, that's how Odo kind of keeps tabs on things. Is he uses Quark as his weather vane. Where's Quark kind of pointing his nose up right now? Where is his ear? Where are his ears tingling? Now I know to look in this direction, that kind of thing. So maybe that's what it comes down to.
And so we also see that um, Quark also works as a great foil for Odo and kind of, I don't want to use the term educating him to humanity because they're both aliens, they're not humans, but he does kind of point him in the direction of things that humanoids like, and in particular Kira, and he's done this a few times with Odo, and it's a weird dynamic in their relationship, the way the two of them oddly kind of help each other out. Because as much as we see Odo trying to kind of come down on Quark, he also looks out for Quark and keeps him from getting into serious trouble.
Right,
And we see Quark also kind of, he takes care of Odo in his own right, making sure he doesn't, get lost in being a changeling basically and thinking he's above it all, and that he needs companionship, he needs friends, he needs a girlfriend, he kind of pointing these things out to him as well to show that he can enjoy life. So
right.
they very weird dynamic, but it definitely grows on you in time. um
Yeah,
One of my I still think of back to my one of my favorite moments is season one, and it's where excuse me, um Quark was trying to arrange Vol fights on the station, and Odo got wind of it, so they brought him to Cisco, and he's just like, I can't be held responsible. I'm just the guy with the room, and if they happen to bring their pets and they happen to have a couple of fights, I mean, I can't be held responsible for this. And Odo's right behind him. He's like, oh yes, you could.
that's
So it's
episode
just,
one, right? That's like
I think no, I think it was
it's like
two
episode
or
two or
three.
three.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was very, and then and Cisco's like, yeah, you will be. I'll make sure you're persecuted or prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And Odo's like, and I didn't think I was gonna like him. So great moment all around for those characters, and it just kind of, I love that dynamic has continued
Right,
throughout 6 seasons now. So yeah, Odo kind of being his ever watchful conscience here.
right, right. Okay, so into the A plot.
So to the A plot, yes.
Yeah. I do have two things to say negatively about the A plot because I do think there is a lot of good stuff to talk about. So let's get the negative out. First off, I feel like the reveal that she's been dead for 3+ years because of the time shenanigans. Again, you play with time travel stories. I'm gonna be a nitpicker, and in my opinion, I feel like they do that, and I understand why they do it, but they do it so that the crew doesn't have to feel too bad about the fact they didn't get there in time. She was long dead. There was no chance that they would be able to save her, no matter what they did about draining the power from the phasers to the bank to get the 9.5 warp speed. None of that was going to save her. She was dead the whole time. But I feel like that choice is a cop out because it would have been a more difficult story to tell to have Cisco and Worf and Bashir and O'Brien. Like all four of them contributed to whether or not they got there in time. Worf was
Mhm.
saying we're gonna lose our defensive capabilities. Bashir is like, well, I'm the one who's trying to keep her alive, and O'Brien is the one who's trying to get the ship to work, and Cisco has to make the call. Like I think it would have been a great little story if all four of them, like Worf never has a moment with her
Yeah.
during talking. Maybe they didn't have enough time in the plot in the story to
Well,
give him a chance, but go ahead.
that's probably the easy explanation that they're limited on time. If they didn't have a B plot, they could have done more with more characters. But the in-universe reason would be that Worf isn't bothered. Everybody else
Yeah,
is strained under this war, but
right.
Worf isn't. Worf is a Klingon. He is basically bred to this. This does not bother him the way that it's bothering everyone else. So yeah, that's why he doesn't have to have a exposition point with Lisa.
Right.
And again, it wouldn't make sense. The Klingon is going to be complaining to the human about how much war sucks. Yeah, that just doesn't make sense. So yeah, keeping war out was a better option.
Yeah, yeah, no, but I think they could have still found a way for him to connect with her like the others did. I mean, I don't know what it would have looked like. We could take time to postulate a story. I
Yeah,
think we can make it work. My point is that the episode would have had a more poignant, heartbreaking, bittersweet element if they had gotten there and she had just died. Like Bashir is desperate to try and save her. You know, O'Brien did everything he could. Cisco made the hard call, and Bashir, the intelligent, I can fix anything guy, he's the one who fails. Like that would have been a poignant moment for him as a character. I mean, his little comment at the end of the episode where he's in front of the casket and he says, "I know I come off as this godlike being who can't bother to be amongst mortals," and like he's
no
trying to
one
tell a
laughs.
joke and no one
Right.
laughs, and he's like, "Oh well, you guys didn't object to that." and O'Brien says, "I will if you insist." He says, "I insist." I object. That was a great little. Their characters have definitely
Yeah.
grown a lot over the seat over the show. Anyway, um, I don't know. We don't have to always put Bashir. We've had episodes where Bashir definitely dealt with someone dying, a loss. He failed to save someone. So that's not the first time that would have happened. However, I'm just saying that I feel like it turns out that the transmission when it hit the
Yeah, they didn't do a
radiation.
good job of explaining that at all.
Not at all, because they also just say it. They just like postulate it as a theory and they
Yeah.
accept it on the spot. I was like, okay,
Well, again, it's one of those situations where by having a B plot, we miss out on a little bit of development, which would have led into that story. If we had
right,
seen some breadcrumbs where they were talking about there being some unusual particle density or some kind of phase shifting or whatever, typical Trek words that we would have picked up on, that there is something other going on here beyond just radiation blocking them from beaming down. It would have made that all the more poignant when they recognized that they couldn't get to her. I would have liked it to be um something like you were saying, where it's a little bit closer, where they just missed the window to get to her. Like maybe, they can't beam down. They go to take the shuttle gets close, but the shuttle can't make it through. It's not strong enough, it's not powerful enough. They could
yeah,
push it and try it, but there's a good possibility that the shuttle will blow up and before they'll ever touch down. So
right,
do you really want to risk it and potentially kill yourself and your officers, or do you realize that this person is just they're just stuck there. There's nothing that we can do. You're gonna have to say your goodbyes. Um,
Yeah, like what if
something.
the ship was there and they just couldn't penetrate it, and
Yeah,
she's dying and they're talking to her through
yeah,
the thing, and they just can't physically get the
yeah.
ship
Like
through without damaging it beyond repair.
right, like she didn't. Yeah, the Olympia, it crashed through the thing.
Right,
It was going down. The sheer mass of the ship pushed through this thing,
right,
and that's why she survived. It's
right.
because the ship took the damage that would have otherwise killed her, and she got lucky at that. Everybody else
Yeah,
died.
right.
So it's like there's no way to do it unless you have something way more powerful than what they've got. They don't have a way of
And
generating it.
maybe to like make this point, like make if the story went this way, like now we are in visual range and we can see her on the screen now, and oh
Yeah,
Lisa, we're
and then
so
having to say
sorry.
right, having to
Yeah,
say goodbye to this person, or I would have liked if they still want to stick with the time thing. I would have liked that they arrived at the planet and she's dead,
right.
and so they beam or no, don't beam back up, but obviously she's dead, so they do what they say they were going to do. They take her remains and go back to the ship, only she's still talking to them because they arrived in time. Like as in
Yeah,
the episode, she's already passed out by the time they get there.
right,
I would have liked it if they had, if she was still conscious but struggling,
right.
and so she's talking about how she can't wait to see them, and she's waiting for them to beam down, only for them to finally get there and she's dead.
She's
And
dead,
it's
but
like,
she's still talking. They can still hear her voice.
right. And so it's like, what's going on? And that's when they realize and start theorizing about the time displacement and everything else. And there's nothing they can do. And so it's a weird conversation because you're telling this person that I've taken your remains, just so you know, we're
Right,
going to take your body back home.
right.
What a weird thing to like a head trip for a
Yeah,
person. You mean I'm dead? I'm talking to you, but
in the
I'm dead,
future. Yeah,
and you're in the future, and you're telling me you're taking my body home.
yeah.
So
Maybe that would
her
have been
last,
too weird. That would have been
I mean,
really, really something.
it would that would have been one
Yeah.
trippy episode
I
because
mean,
then
my whole point is I feel like they copped out. So yes,
yeah,
that would be something more
yeah,
visceral. Um, yeah, I because her whole character was so interesting because she talks about a ship counselor, but I mean she becomes it. That is what she
yeah,
becomes in this episode for them. O'Brien, oh my gosh, O'Brien talking about like emotionally cutting himself off from other people. We've never heard him talk like that before, or if we
no.
have, it's been a little while.
I
Uh,
really think that was probably the best scene of the entire episode. I think
yeah,
O'Brien alone in his bunk, you can just see his face. It's illuminated just enough to see his face and hear her voice, and they're talking, and he is just spot on delivering this wonderful bit about how he's got to shut down to protect himself. Like he likes his friends, he likes his family, but they may not be there. That's what he says. That person may not be there tomorrow.
right,
So don't get too close. Don't talk to them. This is not what we're doing right now because I know as a hardened soldier that that person's not going to be here. So instead of embracing them and enjoying life with them and the time you have with them while you have it, he's shut it down, cut it out. We're not doing this. We're
yeah,
not doing this at all. And that's the point that he makes at the end of the episode. It's just like, I want my friends in my life. That's what he says. You guys are my friends. I want
right,
my friends in my life. I learned from her, because you never know. You're going to turn around one day and someone is not going to be here. Somebody in this group is not going to be here. And I don't want to miss out on
right,
that time with them,
yeah,
with y'all,
yeah,
just great, great delivery.
yeah.
O'Brien really sells this one.
Sean Meany, right? Yeah.
Comb,
Cole Meany. Cole Meany. Who's
yes.
Sean Meany? I don't know if I'm thinking of. Anyway, Cole Meany. Um, yeah, and then the other nitpick I have, and again, I'm just getting nitpicks out so we can talk about the good stuff. And I know it sounds like a lot of nitpicking, but I guess whatever, whatever. I didn't like how they portrayed the Cassidy um Cisco weirdness.
Hmm.
Like, I don't, I don't like the idea that. Cisco seemed to be cold toward her. I feel like a nervous energy would have been more appropriate for him. And because the episode doesn't, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I missed it, but the episode didn't make the full connection that his previous wife died while he was the commander of a ship during a war zone. Like, am I wrong? Did I miss the full connection that
No,
he made?
no. Um, and this is one of those tropes from the 90s that if you didn't watch TV in the 90s or didn't go back and watch shows from the 90s, you would definitely miss out on. This is something that they typically did with male characters who were struggling with making a major change in their life, and they had a girlfriend. They had someone that they wanted to be their girlfriend. There's this disconnect between personal and professional, and it's this whole, in order for that character to become a truly realized, well-rounded man, he's got to make a choice. And so they always present it in this kind of way where he's stuck between one thing or another, and so he's got to figure it out, and while he's trying to figure it out, he's very distant from his loved ones, he's very distant from his friends, because he's got to get his head on straight. And then once he's made his decision, now he's ready to connect all the important things to said decision, which is what we see of Cisco at the end. He's kind of come through whatever this is that he was working through on the Defiant, and with the help of Captain Cusack here, and so now he's ready to engage with Cassidy and move forward, however that's going to be. But again, that's a very typical thing they did in the 90s. I don't know why, and I really feel like you're right. They missed an opportunity here to be like, he's not uncomfortable because he doesn't like Cassidy for sure,
Right.
or that there's anything that
Or
she did that made him uncomfortable, but because her being on the ship and how close they are to each other and his feelings for her, it reminds him of a lot of things about his wife, when he's feeling
and
everything
it can be
from,
unconscious. It doesn't even have to be a
yeah.
conscious thing. Yeah.
But through talking with Cusack, he realizes that like it's he's putting someone that he loves in harm's way once again. She's on a civilian loved one is on the ship. Also, he's feeling coming to grips with the fact that he is in love with Cassidy, and he's lost his wife already. So is this a betrayal of those feelings? Is he truly ready to move on and
Right.
embrace this new aspect of life or not? There are a lot of things they could have done with that, and I wish they would have done more of that kind of conversation with Cusack versus what we got, which is we're relating to each other captain to captain.
Right.
And so while we are going to talk a little bit about our personal lives, we're not going to get too deep into
Right.
that because there's a certain separation that all captains agree we have to have. So, yeah, I wish they had gone beyond that a little bit and given us some of those more personal aspects with Cisco and his development of what's next for him and Cassidy.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, how long have they been a couple now? Like at least 4 seasons,
I
right?
was going
Like
to
it
say
was
3 or
season
4
three that they
years.
met. So I mean, honestly, if he had proposed to her at the end of this episode, like, hey, I mean, maybe it wouldn't have been the right time because this episode was awkward with their relationship. But like, there is a point. Maybe it's time for Cisco to like really commit. Like, I need to propose or something. I don't know. Jake's out of the house. I don't need to like be constantly concerned about him now. Um, I
And
don't know
that's
if that's
also
how this.
the other another common trope of the 90s. The single dad stays single until the child reaches a point of
Maturity.
adulthood, total maturity, total, yeah. So we've finally kind of hit that with Jake. And yeah, so we have to now start setting Cisco up for what is to become of him and the rest of his life.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't like the coldness he seemed to kind of send her way. Like the scene where she comes on the bridge and talking, and he's like glancing at her out of the corner of his eye. Like I feel like the more Cisco thing would be to be real chipper and he's happy. He's gonna be he's gonna have this nervous energy thing, like to smooth it all over. Like any awkwardness that he senses, he's gonna draw it on himself. He's not gonna let her feel it. It's not gonna be her. It's him that's awkward.
Mhm.
Of course, maybe he's a captain. He can't do that while he's on the ship. Maybe that's why he goes cold. I don't know. It just felt like a kind of a really just kind of rough decision to make toward a loved one. And I feel like the episode again could have connected it back to his wife. It's
Yeah.
season 6. Maybe that's just so far removed from all that they don't want to have to
Mhm.
mess with it.
Well, and I
Um,
think they probably feel like they've already touched on the subject of Jennifer Sisko enough. I mean, we had to watch her die
yeah,
in the
yeah,
first season. We
right,
watched the prophets impersonate her a little bit. We got the mirror universe uh, Jennifer coming over and
yep,
ultimately dying. So there's that resolution of that storyline. They probably just felt like that was enough. We're not going to torture this particular subject anymore. So we
right,
need to find a new way to introduce a little bit of confliction with Cisco, and then also resolve it and move him forward now on
right,
this.
yeah, and that all makes sense. I just wish like on both the way they ended this plot line and with this part of the plot they had worked out some more kinks. I feel like,
Hmm.
but her Lisa, Captain Lisa. I initially thought I thought this was going to be a like a siren call. The sound of her voice was not going to be a good thing. It was going to be a siren call. So either the Dominion had sent out some sort of weird signal to try and get them away from battle, or this was some sort of weird entity that was drawing them into its clutches. I'm glad it wasn't that. Like they didn't go with any cliche or
Hmm.
simple storyline. No, this was a real person, and they're trying to save her. It also brings up, of course, the whole thing of it's kind of strange that the captain of a space station would have the time and energy to go on his personal, to personally designed battleship to go run missions like saving people 6 days away.
Listen, so you're not supposed to look at it that closely, but yeah, he's definitely like, especially at this point, um, the Defiant is really like as it's known in various Trek circles and checkers, whatever else. It is the strong arm of Captain Cisco. It is the might of Cisco. It is the pimp hand of Cisco. It is all of these things because it is like, as much as we know that he loves the station and Bajor and so forth, he doesn't seem to be nearly as comfortable anywhere as much as he does on the bridge of the Defiant. It
Uh-huh.
just doesn't seem to work. And I I love that for him. I love the
Yeah.
Defiant because of him. It is my favorite ship. As much as I love the Enterprise D, don't get me wrong, there is something about the Defiant that just, I mean, it works, man. It works for me. And I get it. I get it. So yeah, yes, they're tired. Yes, he could have been anywhere else, but it would seem odd that he's not there if you think about it. So it's his baby. He was designing the ship when he was working
Yeah.
in the Utopia Planitia shipyards before he came to Deep Space Nine. He recognized there was a threat to the station, and he went all the way back to Earth and came back with a Defiant. That ship is connected to him, man.
Right.
So there's no other way around it. So yeah, it fits. It fits.
Yeah. I just I wish they would commit to the either idea that he's either the captain of the station or the captain of the Defiant. Because I
He's
mean,
the
like
captain wherever
Bartok.
he goes. He's the
Yeah.
captain wherever he goes.
Yeah. But I like the idea like Bartok, and we haven't seen him in a while, but he's supposed to also be this like locally stationed captain, and he's able to send him out on missions as necessary. I like give Worf the Defiant maybe. I know you just said it's Cisco's baby, but I don't know. I like the idea that of an admiral. I like the idea of a story focusing on an admiral. And I've said it before, but I
Well,
think the Deep Space Nine captain should be an admiral, not a captain.
Well, and I
Ugh,
think
whatever.
that and we kind of see evidence of that in other iterations of Trek, where the person in command of a space station is an admiral, and when all the other ship captains and crew members and everything else come through, they meet with the admiral for duty assignments to whatever sector it is they're going to be deployed. These are
Right.
long-term missions, of course, and so it makes sense that it'd be an admiral at one of these stations who is coordinating with greater Starfleet so that
Right.
when these ships kind of come to port after being out wherever, they can
Mhm.
get this kind of update. But
Mhm.
in this instance, Deep Space Nine is different because it's not a Federation
A full
station.
Federation station. Yep.
And so the need to have Federation oversight makes sense because they're trying to get Bajor into the Federation, but it wouldn't make sense to put a admiral at that station because you would be risking a very high priority asset at a place where they effectively don't really have a lot of power. He'd be splitting that power with the local government, whereas on an actual Federation station, the admiral's power is absolute. He can only be replaced by another admiral. Whereas
That would
if,
explain why
yeah,
they don't make him a full admiral.
yeah,
I guess, but another compromise option, thinking about the U.S. Indianapolis, as I've been talking about in that book I read, um, Admiral Spruance, if I'm saying his name correctly, used the USS Indianapolis as his flagship, which meant that there was a captain, but he had his own, his own berth, his own
mm.
section of the ship that was meant for him. Designed that way, those ships were sometimes designed for the admirals to be able to be on the ship. So maybe that would be a fun storyline. You have an admiral who's trying to run an entire war, and you got a captain who's trying to run his ship, and like conflicts between the two of them at
Well, and
times.
that's
Like
what we see. We've seen that a couple of times on Next Generation, where
that's true.
Picard is the
Mhm.
captain, and then an admiral comes on board,
That's
and
true.
it effectively becomes the admiral's mission. But Picard is still very much in command of the ship, and it
Right.
seems like even when the admiral, the admiral can, make give orders and whatever else. But if necessary, the captain can override the admiral, and we've seen
Right.
Picard do that a couple of times, which is
And
an
I think
interesting dynamic.
I think a show based on the dynamic would be fascinating.
And this is something that we
Probably
talked
hard
about
to do,
before,
but
where if they had used the Galaxy class the way that it was supposedly supposed to be used, where the Enterprise was the capital flagship, you would have an admiral there, and then the other ships that were tasked to it in this fleet,
yes.
this task force, whatever, all of those captains would then answer to that admiral on the large capital ship.
Right.
And then we see people rotating out for various reasons. And yeah,
Yeah.
maybe a captain and there's one of the captains in the fleet doesn't get along with the admiral, so there's that
Right.
weird adversarial dynamic between the two of them. That would be an interesting show to watch, but we'll probably never see
I
that in our.
You and me, baby. You and me, baby.
Hey, I'm here. Hey, powers that be in Hollywood. Just so
Yeah.
you know, I'm available, so got a lot of ideas for you,
Yeah.
so,
Just on
um,
this quick side note, so I get ads for Star Trek games on my phone. I'm sure you get similar ones. Starfleet Ship Command is the popular one.
mhm.
Did you know? If you've seen the ads that I've seen, Galaxy Quest has just made a cameo appearance on the Federation Fleet Command game.
Mhm.
You can now play as um, Captain.
Mm,
What's his name?
Peter Quincy
It-
Taggart.
yeah, Captain Taggart. There you go. Yeah.
Mhm.
Tim
I've
Allen's
seen it,
character. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah. I just
and
I just
as the
love it.
ship, the Protector, the SE something Protector, so, yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah. It's
can't
pretty.
believe
Name's
that it
pretty
was
cool.
included in a Star Trek game, but whatever, you do what you gotta do, I guess,
Yeah.
so. Well, I think that's gonna pretty much take us to the end here for this particular episode. Any final thoughts on The Sound of Her Voice?
Yeah, I see here on Wikipedia that someone has said this is the eighth best episode. Vulture said this is the eighth best episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine.
Mhm.
I don't know if I would put it quite at eight, but it's a good episode. Yeah.
Well, we all know that, you know, Move Along Home is your favorite, so it's
Oh, I
gotta
wouldn't say that.
it's It's a tough thing to beat there for you.
Ugh.
Um, so next week we are finally going to be talking about the final episode of season 6, and we will actually talk about this episode once again because there's a bit of foreshadowing that happened in this episode that I didn't want to point out because it will ruin it. So we will
Ah,
talk about it after the thing happens in next episode. So stay tuned for
gotcha.
that. Um, in Trek news, other Trek news, the Star Trek Section 31 movie will drop on Paramount Plus on January 24th. So if you are waiting, just know that that's when it will become available. They did have some extra long previews that were available on StarTrek.com. Um, I did not go and check those out because I didn't want to in any way be spoiled for the movie, but I do know they were there for at least they were last week. So if you're interested at all, you can go and check those out. But again, they're just extended scenes that are going to be in the movie anyway. So I didn't see the point. It's more like if you just can't wait until the 24th, there you go. There's something. Um, the name of that show that I was talking about on HBO Max is called Scavenger's Reign. My
Ah,
mistake. Not whatever it was I was saying before. Savage. I said Savage Reign last time. It's called Scavenger's Reign. Go check it out. It's a pretty trippy show. Other than that, there isn't a whole lot of other Trek news stuff. As I've told you before, the Section 31 movie, The Strange New Worlds, is still in post production for season 4, even though they have not released season 3. The Star Trek Academy show seems to be on hold for now. So who knows what's going to happen? I also know that a lot of things have slowed down exponentially due to the fires in California. So if you're, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they announced that they're going to push back the release of pretty much everything while they sort through the devastation of what's happened out there. So we may not be getting season 3 of Strange New Worlds until next year because they don't have it. So we'll see. Hopefully not, but we'll see. When it comes to our show, if you are following along and watching these live broadcasts or watching them with us now, or if you are accessing them later on, then great. You're all caught up. If you are only listening to our show via podcast, you get a treat because this week you will get one episode every day that we'll be releasing on to the various streaming platforms. I finally kind of sort of figured out the algorithm, so we're dealing with a little bit of a backlog, but I've got it to where now it's dropping an episode a day. So one came out today. I already saw the other one is already queued up to come out pretty much first thing tomorrow. So yeah, just look forward to that every day for the next week. You will get one. So we're not that far behind, hoping to have us caught up. And then since we were also, weren't we planning a little bit of a break between season 6 and 7?
oh, I was thinking
So
when we got off today, we would talk a little bit more about that.
okay,
Yeah, I guess we'll figure out
so
some details and talk about it. Yeah.
yeah, so then with that, and if everything holds, then by the time we start season 7, all the episodes should be available, and you should be good to go. That. Do
Nice.
apologize for the delay. I know it probably seems weird that you're listening to things about stuff that happened months ago because we've included, various holidays and elections and everything
Remember
else,
that
and you're like,
episode that you listened to 8 weeks ago? Yeah, we finally came out.
yeah, it came out today. Yeah, it's, who cares? It's January and we're still talking about the election, right? I mean, it happens. So, but yeah, it should all get cleared up. So if you're accessing us via YouTube, then again, you're fine. And if you happen to turn it on your podcast, no, you're not going crazy. You did not hit a wormhole that threw you back in time. It's the algorithm, but we got to figure it out. Okay,
Right.
so. But that's it. That's all the updates I have for you all. Thanks for sticking with us here until we make it all the way through the end of season 6 and then on to season 7.
Woohoo.
Um, so until next week, guys, and the final episode of season 6, takes care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.